It's playoff time. Wild Card Weekend, always one of the most exciting times of the year for any NFL fan because the real football is just about to get started. 4 games on the slate this weekend, of course. I'll be involved in 2 of them. Would like to talk about those first, and then we'll talk about the other 2 quickly as well. Let's start in Houston, where the Texans host the Oakland Raiders. Houston, a 3.5-point favorite at BetSafe, 37, a very low total here. These teams met back on November the 22nd in Mexico City, if you remember. Oakland coming away with a 27-20 victory. Raiders quarterback Derek Carr throwing for 295 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. But my, how things have changed. Oakland's season effectively ended 2 weeks ago when Carr broke his leg. As if that weren't bad enough, their backup quarterback Matt McGloin, injured now as well. He hurt his shoulder in Denver last week. So the Raiders will be turning to rookie Connor Cook at quarterback this week. Now, Cook entered last week's Denver game early, and it went pretty much how you'd expect it to go. He threw for just 150 yards, was intercepted once, and led the team to just 6 points in a 24-6 loss to the Broncos. And before you go saying, well, that was against that great Broncos defense, might I remind you, this Houston defense was actually better than Denver's defense statistically this season. As a matter of fact, the Texans, number 1 in the NFL in total defense, number 2 in passing defense. So this a really tough spot for Connor Cook and this Oakland offense. Now, the Texans have had problems of their own on the offensive side of the ball. They benched their quarterback, Brock Osweiler, a couple of weeks ago, but as luck would have it, the man who replaced Osweiler, Tom Savage, sustained a concussion last week, so Houston turning back to Osweiler. He'll be helped by the return of starting running back Lamar Miller. Miller got off to a great start to the season, but was slowed over the second half of the year with an ankle injury. For that reason, the Texans rested him in weeks 16 and 17, and according to Miller yesterday, he is now as healthy as he's been since training camp. So apparently, the 2 weeks rest served him well. A healthy Lamar Miller will provide a much-needed shot in the arm for this Houston offense. And let's face it, the Texans are facing an Oakland defense that is soft. I mean, the Raiders, 26th in the NFL in total defense, and there really is no bright spot for them on that side of the ball. 24th against the pass, 23rd against the run. Oakland, they allow the opposition to consistently move the ball and put up points all season. The only reason they won as many games as they did was because of their great offense. Derek Carr and company consistently answering the bell and outscoring the opposition. Well, with Connor Cook at quarterback on the road against his great Texans defense, that ain't going to happen. I fully expect Houston to totally smother this Oakland offense, and I think the Texans are going to squeeze out 20 to 24 points. Why do I say that? That's because Oakland has allowed the opposition to reach the 20 to 24 point mark all season, including back on November the 22nd when they allowed these Texans to score 20 points. I see no reason to expect a hair-on-fire defensive performance from the Raiders. I mean, they've had all season to fix that defense, and it hasn't happened. So look, I don't expect the Houston offense to have a huge game because they haven't had many huge games all year, but I do expect them to score enough to get the job done here and cover the 3.5-point number. And I'll tell you what, even though 37 is a really low total, I wouldn't throw any money at that over. I actually lean towards under 37, even though, as I mentioned, my favorite bet there, Houston minus 3.5. Moving on now to Pittsburgh, where the Steelers will host the Miami Dolphins. Pittsburgh, a big 10-point favorite at BetSafe, 47 the total in this game. These teams met way back in week 6. At that time, the Dolphins were just 1-4 on the season. They were 7-point home underdog against these Steelers, but they ended up dominating the game, winning 30-15. Jay Ajayi rushing for 204 yards. But I tell you what, both of these teams, very different right now. You look at the Steelers, they're as hot as any team in the NFL. They have won 7 straight games. They've been doing it on both sides of the ball, but especially with that offense. Maybe the most versatile offense in the NFL. We know all about Ben Roethlisberger and the passing attack. The Steelers 5th in the NFL in passing offense this season. Roethlisberger had another terrific year. His number 1 target, Antonio Brown, might be the best wide receiver in the entire NFL. And the Steelers also might have the best tailback in the entire NFL in Le'Veon Bell. The guy can do it all out of the backfield, great with the ball in his hands. Also a real threat as a receiver out of the backfield. This Pittsburgh offense clicking on all cylinders right now. We mentioned they've won 7 straight games. Well, they've scored 24 points or more in all 7 of those games. Miami has been very average on defense this season. I do not expect them to slow down the Steelers. And you look at this Dolphins offense, they're really sinking here towards the end of the year. Ryan Tannehill sprained his MCL and partially tore his ACL 3 weeks ago, so the Dolphins have been forced to turn to veteran backup Matt Moore at quarterback. Now, Tannehill apparently has a chance to play this weekend. Dolphins coach Adam Gase announced yesterday that they're going to take a wait-and-see approach on Tannehill. He's officially listed as questionable. But with a partially torn ACL, we know he's not going to be 100% if he does play. And this Steelers defense is solid. 12th in total defense, top half of the league in both rushing defense and passing defense. Now, we mentioned the first time these teams met, Miami had great success running the football. Jay Ajayi with 204 rushing yards. Keep in mind that at that time, the Dolphins' offensive line was fully healthy. Specifically, they had starting center Mike Pouncey in the fold. Pouncey, of course, the brother of Steelers center Marquise Pouncey, both the Pouncey twins among the best in the NFL at what they do. And Mike Pouncey, such a key for this Dolphins running game. The Dolphins averaged 60 more rushing yards per game, 60 more rushing yards per game when Pouncey was in the lineup than when he was out. And of course, now Pouncey out for the remainder of the season with that hip injury. So I do not expect a repeat performance from Jay Ajayi in this one. And look, I just don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to keep up with this Steelers offense. They might be able to hang around for a half or 2.5 quarters, but I think the Steelers pull away in the second half of this one, and I do like them to cover the 10-point number. Look, I don't like giving a double-digit number in a playoff situation any more than anybody else, but in this case, I do think it's warranted. Pittsburgh -10, my play there. There you have it, folks. Those are my two recommendations for this wild card weekend. I like Houston -3.5 and Pittsburgh -10. There are two other games as well, though. Let's quickly talk about those. New York Giants going on the road to face the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay a 4.5-point favorite at BetSafe, 44.5 the total there. These teams met back in Week 5 in Green Bay. The Packers coming away with a 23-16 victory. Aaron Rodgers held in check in that game. Only threw for 259 yards, was intercepted twice. And if the Dolphins are going to have a chance here in this one, they're going to have to put forth a similar type of performance. But they might be able to because their defense has been good all year. 10th in the league in total defense. They've been especially good in the secondary. Janoris Jenkins has emerged as, you might not want to call him a shutdown corner because the NFL, it seems like, has so few true shutdown corners. But Janoris Jenkins clearly now the best cornerback on this New York Giants roster, and he will most likely shadow Jordy Nelson throughout this game. The Giants really need some production from their offense. 25th in the NFL in total offense. When you look at the talent they have, they should be better than that. The offense over the second half of the year really turned into the Odell Beckham show. And Beckham, as great as he is, he needs some help. Manning needs to diversify it a little bit. It's not like they don't have other weapons on that offense. And the Green Bay Packers, 31st in the NFL in passing defense this season. The Packers are not good in the secondary. Only one team surrendered more passing yards than Green Bay this year. So Eli with a golden opportunity here to sort of jumpstart that passing attack and make this a game. Because I'm telling you, if the Giants cannot score here, as good as their defense has been, the Packers have picked up some momentum here over the second half of the season. They've won 6 straight games. Aaron Rodgers playing really well right now. If Eli Manning cannot challenge this Packers secondary, the Giants will not be competitive here. I have a lean towards Green Bay in this game. I also lean towards under 44.5, but as I said, I've decided to stay away from this one. Final game on this wild card weekend. What about the Detroit Lions going on the road to face the Seattle Seahawks? Seattle a 7.5-point favorite at BetSafe, 43 the total in this one. Now, the Lions moving in the wrong direction towards the end of the year. They have now lost 3 straight games. All 3 losses did come to playoff teams, but still, 3 straight losses heading in the playoffs. Not the type of role you want to be on. And this Detroit team, statistically, just not very impressive. Bottom half of the league in both total offense and total defense. However, they were a plucky team this season. They hung around, won a lot of games. It didn't seem like they should win. Kept it close a lot of times when it seemed like they were on the verge of getting blown out, which is why I'd be really careful about giving 7.5 points here if I were a Seahawks bettor. Keep in mind, the Seahawks, they weren't playing their best football towards the end of the season either. In their last 2 games, they lost the Arizona Cardinals, and then they squeaked by the lowly San Francisco 49ers 25-23, despite playing their starters in that game. You look at the Seattle offense, they don't run the ball like they used to, just 25th in rushing offense. The Seahawks have really been led by the passing of Russell Wilson this season. They're no longer a power running team. And Detroit, 13 of their 16 games, 13 of the Lions' 16 games this season were decided by 7 points or fewer. So again, I'd be a little skittish about backing Seattle and giving 7.5 points to this Lions team that has just seemed to keep it close all year long. But I don't feel strongly about that one, so like the Giants-Green Bay game, I've decided to stay away. The two games I'll be involved in this weekend, as we said earlier, Houston minus 3.5 at home against the Oakland Raiders, and Pittsburgh minus 10 at home against the Miami Dolphins. Folks, I wish you best of luck in whatever you decide to do this weekend, just so long as your interests don't conflict with my interests. Enjoy the playoffs.